as a singing teacher, I'm often asked by my students and readers of my website for recommendations for resources that they can go to when they have questions. And of course, the most important resource for a student of voice is a qualified singing teacher. Someone who can listen to you and observe you and provide you with strategies and tools that are going to help you reach your singing goals. But as lifelong learners, we're naturally curious about this instrument that we play. We want to know as much about it as we can. And so I feel as though one of my responsibilities as a singing teacher is to help guide my students and readers toward accurate information, toward good resources that can help them along that journey toward reaching their singing goals. So in today's video, some singing teachers from around the world and from various backgrounds are going to share with you some of the resources that they love to recommend to their students and to readers of their websites and blogs.
What are the top 3 books or other resources that you recommend to your students, and what's so great about them? Well, that is a great question. I have a lot of books. And I've read a lot of books, and a lot of those books are pedagogy books. So they're for teachers, and they're for sort of perfecting the craft of teaching. So in terms of targeting books for my students and what's great about them, that's going to depend on the student for real. If I'm constructing, the abstract, sharing a book with a student, maybe there's a tie for first place. I have a couple books here. So these two are sort of first-person point of view books. This one is Renee Fleming's The Inner Voice. And it's written in the first person. It's very personable. And she basically just sort of shares her path. And I think that can speak especially to soprano students. It can really, really speak to them. But I think it can speak to pretty much any student because she's pretty candid in here about what she's gone through and how things evolve for her. And I think that's it's just a good perspective to have. And likewise, this is Jerome Hines' Great Singers on Great Singing. So it's not the same story that's in here. This is more specific to Renee, but this is a series of interviews with great singers from back in the day and their thoughts on singing. And what's neat about this one is that some of the singers disagree, or some don't really think about it and say so, or some are really shy to offer what's really going on for them. And you can kind of contrast, a couple of people in this book, and it gets you to thinking for yourself, which is what I like about this. You sort of either can see yourself or you can disagree with some of what they say, but you can't deny that each of these singers had an amazing career based on what they're saying. So that would be my first recommendation. I would also, if I had a student who was super motivated, I think this is a really good book. This is The Anatomy of Voice by Calloway. And it's full of pictures about singing and our physiology and what's actually there, as opposed to, just dreaming that your entire torso is occupied by your lungs, or, where else? Oh my God, that people put their diaphragm down in their belly. Well, you'll discover, and this book actually shows you physiologically where things are located. Now, that's not to say that imagery isn't useful. It totally is. But a book like this will help a student locate exactly what's physiologically true and then start to body map just a little bit more efficiently. So I think this is a super, super good book. But again, I wouldn't give this to like a starter student unless, of course, they were, let's say, an adult who was expressing an interest in physiology and coming from a science background. This book would be for a student maybe that I've been with for a while who has some specific and pointed questions about where things reside, or how the breathing manifests, blah blah blah. So caveat with that. And then maybe the third book that I would recommend is this one, and you can get this in any number of editions. This is just one I happen to have at arm's reach. I've got another version of it somewhere. This is Lamperti's Vocal Wisdom. Not everything that you read in this book is going to be direct and infallible. It's full of axioms and The reason I like this is because Lamperti, it underpins, the bel canto technique, and it's the type of reading, and it's very, it's not a big book, but it's the type of reading that really can make you think and can make you bounce your own ideas off of what he's saying. And, so he says something a little mysterious or a little enigmatic, you can kind of say, what do I think about that? Or, man, I think I disagree with that. And it gets you thinking, or, wow, that's a really elegant way to express this thing that I hadn't put together for myself yet. So I think it's, time well spent, and any good singer can really benefit from reading Lamperti. So that would be my answer, the top 3.
There are lots of resources that I recommend to students based on their needs and their curiosities, but today I'm just going to list 3. So the first of which is Solutions for Singers by Richard Miller. This was actually the first vocal pedagogy book that I ever purchased when I was a new singing teacher. And there are a few things that I love about this book. First of all, it's very digestible. It's not terribly thick, not terribly dense, and the language is pretty accessible, unlike some of his other works, including The Structure of Singing, which can kind of sort of go over people's heads if they're not really well versed in anatomy and physiology. And I love that it's in a Q&A format, which is just fantastic. He based this on a lot of the questions he was receiving via email and after master classes and such. And I feel as though it covers a broad scope of topics. Most of the topics that we really need to know about, from diction to the breath to vibrato to everything. He talks about the jaw and the tongue and proper relationships and body alignment and such. And so I feel like it's a really good overview of vocal technique. And although he does have a classical leaning, he did teach classical styles of music, I recommend this to all of my students regardless of what styles they sing in. I feel like physiological and acoustical laws are physiological and acoustical laws that are applicable to singers of all different styles. So if you're looking for a book to kind of start you out along this process of learning more about the voice, just kind of to satiate your hunger a little bit, I really highly recommend Solutions for Singers by Richard Miller. I think it's a great place to start, and it would be a great addition to your library, or a great start in building your library. And the second resource that I recommend is a website called Voice Science Works. They also have a great Facebook page that has a lot of links that they share to different articles and research and such. They're science-based, but at the same time, they try to present the information in a way that's very accessible to the average singer out there who maybe hasn't studied acoustical science and anatomy and physiology at med school. So I love that. They've got a number of articles on their website that have information about things like straw phonation and the science behind that. And they have a great page of recommended resources. They have links to the websites of some of this country's leading voice doctors. And they also have links to podcasts and other websites. SingWise made the list. I feel so honored. And so it's a really great resource for you to check out if you want to dive a little bit deeper, and if you also want to find out who's doing what in the singing industry, who is putting out information that is accurate and science-based. It's a really great place to start. And the third resource that I recommend would be podcasts. I don't know if you listen to podcasts or not, but sometimes they're a great way for us to be able to feed our curiosities while we're doing other things too. We can listen while we're preparing dinner or doing work around the house, and it's a great way to sort of multitask, but also continue again to feed your curiosity so that you can continue to learn more about the voice. And 2 podcasts in particular that I would recommend highly are The Naked Vocalist, and of course we've had Chris Johnson of The Naked Vocalist participating in this series, and he and Steve Giles do a really great job of bringing in some really top quality guests on their show. They had Jeannie Lovetri on there talking about belting. They cover a broad range of topics, and they do it in kind of a lighthearted, funny way. So I'd really encourage you to check out the Naked Vocalist podcast. And a second podcast that I recommend would be John Henny's The Intelligent Vocalist. John has also participated in this series. And what I love about John's podcast is that He covers a broad scope of topics, from the science of singing, acoustical science and such, to the business of being a singer. And I love that he tries to consider the whole singer, and he does it in a very accessible and very intelligent way. So I would highly recommend John's podcast, The Intelligent Vocalist. And those are my 3 top recommended resources.
My top 3 vocal resources. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give you 3 categories and slip a couple of extra ones in there. In terms of vocal science and how the voice works. Karyn's website is absolutely fantastic, and just going into the vocal acoustics, it's absolutely spot on. I recommend it all the time. Also, Voice Science Works. David and Laurel have put together a fantastic resource on vocal science. And Dr. Ingo Tietze, his website, ncvs.org, just for the list of medications and how it affects the voice alone, is just a fantastic resource for singers. Podcasts, I really love The Naked Vocalist. It's just a lot of fun. Those guys are really funny. And then I have to recommend my good friend Michael Goodrich's podcast, The Inner Singer. Mike goes into some just wonderful mindset things with singing and performance and self-judgment. I mean, it really, so much of the singing battle is mental, and Mike's podcast is just absolutely wonderful with that. And then finally, books. You know what? I'm going to recommend a book that's not even about singing. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And it's this wonderful book about how to do undistracted, focused work in this era of constant stimulus addiction, with social media and all these alerts, and the brain becoming unfocused and actually stimulus addicted. And as a singer, we need to be able to focus and do this very, very low stimulus, high reward work. You know, bouncing around on Facebook or Instagram is high stimulus, low reward for the most part. We need to learn about low stimulus, high reward, and that is actually doing the real work you need to do to be a fantastic singer. So there are my 3 resources. Thank you.
Hey there. So I am here to talk about the 3 books, or in my case, a few extras, that I think are most important for singers and most useful. So I'm going to start with a book that I was actually given by my voice teacher in high school, my freshman year of college at NEC. And I think it's really indispensable for all singers, all voice users, even if you do voiceover, if you do any sort of public speaking, you should own this book. So it is Care of the Professional Voice, and it covers so much. It talks about how the voice works, anatomy, how to take care of your voice. It covers traveling, different medication, disorders. There are all sorts of diagrams, lots of scope images, particularly of some nasty things, polyps, nodules, hemorrhages, laryngitis, fungal laryngitis, but it's really useful. You get an idea of all sorts of things, and it also covers a lot of just basic healthy habits that we should all have to ensure that our voice can work at peak performance. So, number 1.
Hi, my name's Christopher David Mitchell, vocal coach here in London, and today I want to help you out with my top 3 resources for singers. My first resource recommendation would be a grouping of books, blogs, YouTube and vocal courses. There's really pretty good value here, but I do find a lot more value in the next two tips. These tend to be more theory-based. I really think of singing as a sport, and I don't believe that you can become a master of singing, or any sport for that matter, by reading about it necessarily, or watching someone else do it, which is sort of YouTube or the books or the blogs. Some of that can be nice, and it can help somewhat, but I really think the real mastery is going to come from my tips on number 2 and 3 coming up. Having said that, I did get a lot of value from some YouTube channels from my mentors, such as The Singing Success with Brett Manning, thank you Brett, and also Justin Stoney at New York Vocal Coaching, who I worked alongside, really a huge mentor of mine who I thank every day, and also Aaron Hagen, who's in New York too. Those 3 really are my mentors, and I'm sort of very thankful and grateful that I got to work with all of them, and they're sort of with me in my coaching every day. So check those guys out if you get the chance. Which leads me on nicely to my resource number 2 tip, which would be getting a great vocal coach. So reading about singing or blogs, that's nice, and it can be nice to know somewhat what's going on, but it will never replace doing it, and it will never replace having a really great coach to help you through that. A really great coach who you trust your voice with, who can be the ears in the room to hear exactly what you're doing. Sometimes singing can be a really complex thing to get good at, and I know with me, I was going down roads of compression or chest voice or mixed voice, and I wasn't quite doing it right, and I would have saved myself a lot of time by always constantly getting with a great coach, as I have done over a lot of the years. But sometimes I left myself to it, and I now really understand the value of a great coach always, and someone that you really trust, who can always be there with you, who can give you exercises that are individual to you and really help you with your vocal development. So a great coach would be an essential. Please, everyone, singers out there, get with a great coach who you trust. And my number 1 resource above all the blogs and books and courses in the world and all the coaches in the world, it comes from you. There's no answer out there. Right? Everyone thinks that there's this one answer where if I read that one book, or if I understand the formants a bit better, then I'll be a master at singing. Singing, like I say, is a vocal sport. The mastery of singing is in the doing, not the theory. What sportsmen in tennis, golf, if they were just reading books about golf and tennis and stuff like that, would they become a master? No, it comes from you experiencing it. So my number 1 resource is get out there and sing. Get out there and do it. Get on stage. The theory that you think you know about the singing voice will be nothing compared to what you know after experiencing being on stage and performing. You will then grow and learn so much from doing the singing, or the sports person playing the game. That's how you become a master at something. It's by doing it. So the answer to the 3rd one is within you. It's you experiencing it and doing it, putting yourself out there and continuing to actually go out and practically do the singing. In an ideal world, it would be some theory, that's great too, also a vocal coach, but if you had to do one thing, it would be keep doing the singing. Always keep working on your voice. Become the best singer you can be, and that is not going to come from information. That is not going to come from theory. Mastery comes from the doing.
Hi, my name is Christin Rondo. I'm a soprano and voice teacher with Sand Dollar Music in Dayton, Ohio. And 3 resources that I just love for singers are as follows. The first is a brand new book called Sane, S-A-N-E, Sane Singing by Brian Lee. It is not yet available for purchase, but it will be in the next few weeks. So late spring, early summer of 2018, you'll be able to find it on Amazon. I had the chance to read it a little bit early, and this is one of the most beautiful, empowering, enlightening, encouraging books on singing that I have ever read. It is going to be my go-to gift for every graduating senior and for every adult. Basically for every student I have who is pondering a career as a singer, they're all getting this book. One thing that I really love is at the end, Brian has what he calls SAPs, self-assessment protocols for singers, where they're exercises and observations that you can use to establish a baseline for your singing and then observe your progress over time and chart whether or not you're getting towards your goals. So yeah, that's my first, Sane Singing by Brian Lee. It will be available on Amazon very soon. My next resource that I love is it's called The Singer's Practice Log. It is by Nancy Boss. You can find this on Amazon. She just released it about a month or two ago. And it is exactly what the name says. It's a practice log. It is broken down by weeks and months. You can easily chart your goals and keep track of your progress. You can, it has a section for songs you've been working on, songs you're working on right now, what you want to work on in the future. It even has staff papers so you can keep track of all your favorite exercises. The Singer's Practice Log would actually pair really nicely with Brian's SAPs in Sane Singing, because you can do the SAPs exercises and then chart them in the Singer's Practice Log. My third resource that I love, oh my goodness, is Nikki Loney's full voice workbooks and Sight Singing Superhero. I use these for all of my singers, regardless of age. The full voice workbooks uses tonic solfa. It's super accessible. Whether or not you've ever taught sight singing, you can just dive right into this and learn right along with your students. They are fabulous. And then the Sight Singing Superhero, you can purchase a license, and then it's downloadable and reproducible. And so I use those with my younger singers as well. And we actually have fun sight reading. It's really amazing how these products are so elegantly and efficiently designed. So there you have it, my 3 resources that I love. I don't have copies of the last 2 because I keep buying them and giving them away because I love them so much. But Brian Lee's Sane Singing, which will be available for purchase on Amazon later in 2018. Nancy Boss's Singer's Practice Log, which is already available on Amazon. And Nikki Loney's Full Voice Workbooks and Sight Singing Superhero, which you can find at thefullvoice.com. Thank you very much.
When it comes to books that I recommend for my students, there is only one book that I recommend that every single one of my students reads. And in fact, I think this book is so important that I have held 3 different book discussion groups about this book. And this book has been around for a long time, and it has nothing to do with singing. The book is The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Calloway. I think the best way that I could explain what the book is about is by actually reading a couple of the bullet points on the back of the book. They are: the inner game of tennis, not the inner game of music, but the inner game of tennis, uses the mind-body connection to learn, use the mind-body connection to learn to trust yourself, it says, on the court. But when you read this book, you learn how to trust yourself in a performance situation, whether it's on a tennis court or wherever. Find the state of relaxed concentration that allows you to play at your best. And I know relaxed isn't a word that always comes to mind when it comes to performing. And that's one of the beauties of this book, is you figure out your optimal level of, not relaxedness or relaxed, and you work it. You learn how to use it in performance. Another important point on here is focus your mind to overcome nervousness and self-doubt. So if you're plagued by nervousness and self-doubt, and who isn't, then this book really, I think that's the essence of this book. It really gets down to what's going on in our minds and how do we work that out so that distractions are no longer a part of the performance process.
I am so envious of developing singers these days because the amount of resources available are just about limitless. The internet wasn't even a dream 45 years ago when I was coming of age. And so there is just a glut of video tutorials and blogs about singing. And I know this makes it difficult to find out which one is legit and which one isn't, but I wouldn't worry about that. It's easy enough to sample a lot of different perspectives and see what works for you. Incidentally, if you're doing a sort of a self-help method of developing your voice, I highly recommend you do develop some habits of giving yourself feedback loops. And probably the easiest way to do that is with your phone. Record yourself often when you're vocalizing and singing and ask yourself if you're hearing what you intended to do. I have old devices. It's a metronome. I have a sound pressure level meter. It's a volume meter. It's also a good idea to get a different perspective on your voice through a visual, through your eyes. So, a lot of programs have it where you can see your pitch and see your volume. And that just means that a different aspect of your brain is monitoring your singing. And then if you're old school like me and you like books, this is one I grew up with for 40 years ago. Mary Beth Bunch, Dynamics of the Singing Voice. I liked it back then because it was fairly unmusically biased and it had very good diagrams of the anatomy. For the psyche of the singer, I love this book, The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten. I think it's so important that we immerse ourselves in music as literally a spiritual journey when we sing. And I agree with a lot of what Victor writes about in the book. And then I would be remiss if I didn't give myself a shameless plug here. The Rock and Roll Singer Survival Manual is not about rock singing. It's about it's about singing in general, I should say. And I will say that 40 years ago, I learned a lot about singing, drawing from classical lessons and drawing from classical books. So it wouldn't hurt some legit singers to read up on some rock.
Hello, this is Michelle Breedt speaking. This is such a hard one. 3 books. Well, here's book number 1, Your Voice, An Inside View. A wonderful book that gives you a wonderful bird's eye view of your voice from the inside, biologically as well as scientifically. I find this really a very informative, well-structured book. Number 2 would be Solutions for Singers. A great book by Richard Miller, answering questions from singers, all sorts of questions, and I'm sure you might find a question that you have and you find it brilliantly answered by Richard Miller. The third book is really a gem because so often we don't quite know as classical opera singers what we need to sing, repertoire, opera arias, songs, lieder, whatever. And here's a great, wonderful book. It's called Music for the Voice by Karyn, and it's structured beautifully. It gives you an overview as far as the tessitura, the compass of the interval compass, yes, and as well as a short description of what type of aria it's like, and it's divided into different categories as far as French, German, Italian music is concerned for all voice types. Really a gem for operatic singers.
I'm going to take a shortcut here and direct people to my video where I review and recommend 5 excellent books for the developing singer. Hopefully, Karyn will leave a link to the video in the description section below for you to watch later.
Okay, resources. Here we go. Zen and the Art of Archery. It teaches you to be in the moment, and that's where great singing comes from, when you're in the moment. It may sound easy, but it's not as easy as you think. So you want to put that into your exercises, put that into your daily life, live it, okay? And when you do that, when you're on stage, it's really easy, you know? Also the 4 agreements about living your truth. Yeah, that's not so easy. No, I'm teasing. But anyway, but once you live in your truth, or try to, and then you can sing in your truth. And, you're able to get to the vulnerable side, the side that sometimes we close down, from the world. But we really need that to sing in. And Armand DeMille, he was a big influence on me. He was from the positive mind. I studied privately the neuroscience and the science and how we learn and what we do when fear is around and things like that. And the other thing I want to say is get a master teacher, because that's a great source. All right? I've got one. Okay? And also a small group of colleagues who are your community, and you can go to them and they can go to you, and you can talk about things and debate them. I've got a small group. Some are masters in Feldenkrais, Robert. Some are in science, Richard, in neuroscience, in classical, and in all different areas, improvisation, wherever. But you have a whole community that you can call on, contemporary, anything. So you should form that where you live, or via Skype or whatever. But I find that to be helpful. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Three resources that I really like to do with singing. Number one, Singing for the Stars by Seth Riggs. It doesn't answer all of life's problems, I will say that. But if you have a voice that's very imbalanced, where it snaps over into different registers, like the compression loss is severe, or if you can't get a balance, you're kind of reaching for notes and things like that, this book methodically, step by step, guides you how to retrain the voice so you have that connected, balanced bass, which you can then obviously branch out from. The exercises are laid down in order, first of all, to deactivate the wrong muscles and to retrain the neuromuscular system so that it believes it can make the pitches without the wrong muscles being involved. Once that's been achieved, it increases the range, and it uses a variety of exercises to do this. You have to do it in order, and when you've completed each exercise, you tick it off and then go on to the next one. I found it amazing. A lot of my students find it amazing. I always recommend it. Number two, this is something that was recommended to me by Rashid Hayek of R&B Singing Lessons. It's an app called The Amazing Slowdowner. So you download it onto your tablet or your computer, and you can feed any song through it or any line, and it will slow it right down, whatever speed you want. You can also change the key, so if something's too high for you at the moment, you can lower the key and practice it there. But what it's done for me is it's allowed me to zoom in and really be able to observe what a singer's doing, the transitions between vowels, all sorts of different things like that. And you can actually feed your own recordings into it as well and really analyze your singing. It's like zooming in. It's been a game changer for me. Slow practice, obviously, that's a no-brainer, but this app, very, very helpful, and I would recommend it. It's very interesting to listen to things slowed down as well, because often you miss things. You can even analyze things like vibrato, all these little nitpicky details. Number three, I really like at the moment CVT, the Complete Vocal Institute app. I find the information very relevant to me, especially the vowel charts, and I find it very interesting. Again, it's not for everybody, and I don't recommend it to everybody, but I really relate to the teachings. I like the 4 modes. To me, I like to break things down into categories. That's how I learn. I like to have boundaries and put things into boxes, because I am somebody who's quite creative and can be scatterbrained if I don't organize what I'm doing and get more methodical. So again, I like the methodology of CVT, and I like the categorizations of the different sound colors.